Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the fascinating text of Matthew chapter 2. And let me tell you, this isn't just some dry historical recounting. Not at all. It's an incredible, high-stakes narrative packed with worship, extreme danger, ancient prophecy, and divine protection. We're going to break down this text step by step so we can really see this massive collision between a divine plan and earthly power. Let's just jump right in.
To kick things off, we really have to ask the exact question posed by our source material. What happens when a newborn king enters a world that's already ruled by a jealous king? I mean, right away, that question sets the stage for a massive, tense conflict. It's a classic showdown, but with absolutely monumental historical and theological stakes.
All right, part 1, the newborn king arrives. So picture this. According to the text, Jesus has just been born in Bethlehem. Out of nowhere, wise men from the east who have been following this extraordinary star all the way to Jerusalem show up and ask a very bold, very specific question. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? We have seen his star and have come to worship him. You can literally imagine the whispers and the sudden panic this caused. They're actively looking for a new king in a city that, well, already has one. That instantly raises the stakes of our whole narrative.
Which brings us to part 2, King Herod's secret plan.
Now, as you might guess, when word reaches King Herod about these travelers looking for a king of the Jews, he is absolutely terrified of losing his throne. So he scrambles and executes a 3-step plan. First, he gathers intelligence. He calls in the chief priests and teachers of the law, demanding to know where the Messiah is supposed to be born. They quote the ancient prophet Micah and tell him Bethlehem. Second, he brings in the wise men. Pretending to be their ally, he secretly instructs them to go find the child carefully and then report back to him. But step 3 reveals his true motive. Look, Herod has absolutely no intention of worshiping Jesus, none. He wants to kill him. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the sheer deception at play here. Just listen to Herod's instructions. Find the child carefully, then come back and tell me where he is. It sounds so supportive, doesn't it? Like he's just a curious believer. But he completely masks his murderous intent with this false promise of wanting to worship the child himself. It's a calculated secret trap set by a terrified ruler clinging desperately to his earthly power.
Moving on to part 3, worship and 3 gifts.
So, the wise men finally make it to the house, and they don't just stand there taking it in, they physically bow down to worship. Plus, they didn't come empty-handed, they presented 3 highly symbolic gifts. First, gold, which honors Jesus' royal status as king. Then, frankincense, symbolizing deity and worship. And finally, myrrh. Now, myrrh is a burial spice, which incredibly early on points right toward his future suffering and death. Every single detail here carries massive significance for this child's life.
It is absolutely wild to look at the stark contrast between these 2 entirely different reactions to the newborn king. Think about it. On one side, we have the wise men seeking to worship, guided by a divine star, and eventually warned by God in a dream to go home a totally different route. And on the other side, King Herod, seeking to kill, driven by pure jealousy and fear of losing his throne, relying entirely on secret deception. It's this exact divergence that leads God to intervene, warning the wise men in that dream and completely bypassing Herod's trap.
That takes us to part 4, escape from the tragedy. Okay, so the wise men are gone, but the tension, it's literally at a boiling point. The narrative shifts instantly from a quiet, beautiful scene of worship to an urgent, life-or-death escape. An angel suddenly appears to Joseph in a dream with a palpable, frantic message. Get up, take the child and his mother, escape to Egypt. Herod is searching for the child to kill him. And Joseph doesn't even wait for the sun to come up. He obeys without delay, taking Mary and Jesus into the night to escape to Egypt. This swift, decisive action proves that God protects his son exactly as promised, orchestrating their safety right under the nose of a very dangerous king. But tragically, earthly power strikes back. When Herod realizes he's been played and the wise men aren't returning, his fear mutates into absolute fury, and his unchecked jealousy results in a devastating, heartbreaking tragedy. He orders that every single boy 2 years old and younger in Bethlehem be killed. It's an incredibly dark, sobering moment in the text. It really highlights the devastating consequences of unchecked power and pride. Part 5, fulfilling the prophets.
Eventually, following King Herod's death, the immediate danger begins to lift, and we can actually trace a very specific physical journey here. First, they're in Bethlehem, the site of the birth and Herod's tragic decree. Second, they flee down to Egypt, representing their escape and God's absolute protection. Finally, learning that Herod's son is now ruling Judea, they're warned to bypass that whole region and move further north to settle in Nazareth. Every single geographical move was divinely orchestrated to keep the child safe.
But what's really fascinating here is how the source text explicitly connects each of these major locations and events to specific ancient prophecies being perfectly fulfilled. The birth in Bethlehem, that fulfills the prophet Micah. The escape to Egypt, that fulfills the promise, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Even the horrific tragedy in Bethlehem is connected to the prophet Jeremiah describing deep mourning. And finally, settling in Nazareth fulfills the prophecy that he would be called a Nazarene. The text is making a very clear, deliberate argument here. Nothing happening in this story is an accident.
And finally, part 6, Lessons from Chapter 2.
So, we've made it through this incredibly tense historical thriller. Let's take a step back and synthesize exactly what powerful truths the source distills for us. First, through the wise men, we see that true worship seeks Jesus above everything else, even if it requires a long, incredibly dangerous journey. Second, looking at Herod, we learn how deeply pride and jealousy can harden the human heart. Third, we see crystal clear that God faithfully protects and guides those who trust him, just like he did with Joseph. Fourth, we're shown that Jesus fulfilled God's ancient promises right from the very beginning of his life. And finally, the overarching theme of the whole chapter. Even when earthly evil seemed impossibly powerful, God's plan absolutely could not be stopped.
I want to end our explainer today with a thought-provoking question, one directly inspired by the text we just uncovered together. If even the most powerful kings and the most elaborate deceptions cannot stop God's plan, where are you placing your trust today? It's a fascinating reflection on the historical tension between earthly power and the unchanging nature of God's promises. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope breaking down this remarkable text has helped you see the incredible detail of this narrative in a whole new light.